Hello and welcome to Cutter Farms. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Real Dashboard mod by Perma's Modding. Specifically, we're going to be going over how to add support for this mod to any vehicle in the game. If you're looking for a more general overview of what the mod is and how it works, I did a preview of how this mod works in-game a couple months ago, and we'll link that video in the description. However, at a high level, this mod allows you to add a display to your vehicle that will show the current fill level, mass, and density of any internal or attached containers. As a bonus, it will also make it so that the in-cab speedometer will show your speed in the same unit of measure as your game settings. So now the in-cab display will match the HUD overlay here if you're in miles per hour. So how do we set this up? First, we need to head over to the GitHub page for the project to get the SDK files. You can find the link here in the mod's description on the official Mod Hub page. In order to download the SDK files, you'll need to click here where it says sdk.zip and then click the download button here on the next page. Once you have the SDK downloaded, you'll also need to pick a vehicle to add the dashboard to. In our case, I'm going to add it to one of my favorite tractors in Farm Sim, the 8RX by Sid Modding. This is probably a good point to mention that Perma's Modding has included a written guide in PDF format in the SDK download. So if you drill into the SDK zip in the SDK folder, you'll find this guide.pdf. This guide will walk you through the same steps that we're about to go through in this video, so you may find it helpful to use as a reference as you go through this process. And I just wanted to take a moment to point out here in the credits for the mod, Perma's calls out quite a few other individuals that have helped him in some ways with getting his mod pulled together and put onto the Mod Hub. I always love to see credit given where it's due. There's a lot of great people in the Farm Sim community that are always willing to help out. So in order to make the necessary changes to the vehicle, first we need to unzip it by right-clicking and selecting Extract All and following the prompts to extract the files to our current folder. Once extracted, we need to copy the real dashboard files from the SDK into the vehicle. I find it easiest to have two separate file manager windows open for this step. On the one hand, we're going to open the sdk.zip and drill into the SDK folder. And on the other side, we're going to open up the folder that we just extracted for our vehicle. In our case, we're going to be setting up a monitor with a horizontal orientation. So we're going to select the two files related to the horizontal monitor and the monitor textures folder by holding down the Control key and clicking on all three of these files. If you want a vertical monitor, you would simply use the two vertical files instead. With all three of these files selected, we can click and drag them over here into our mod directory, which will copy those three files from the SDK into our vehicle. Once the files are copied, we'll need to find the i3D file for the vehicle we wish to modify. In our example, there are actually three separate vehicles in this pack. We're only going to be modifying the 8RX today. To open this i3D file, we will need to have the Giants editor installed, and then we can edit this file simply by double-clicking on it. If you're like me and you've been editing mods across multiple versions of Farm Sim, you may see a screen like this when opening the i3D file. We're going to use the most up-to-date version of the editor, at least at the time of this recording, which is 9.03. With the vehicle open, we're going to come up here to the File menu and select Import. We then need to find the directory that we're working in for this particular mod. In my case, I've already navigated here. We've got the John Deere 8 Series 2020. And you can see here, we have this tabpad horizontal.i3d file, which we copied in the previous step. I'm going to import this simply by double-clicking it. You can see now that it's added the monitor node to the scene graph. With the monitor node selected, we now need to move it to where we'd like it to be placed inside the cab by using the three colored arrows. However, as you can see, it's a little bit awkward to work with this default view. In order to move your view around inside the viewport, you can simply hold down the right mouse button and drag around the screen to change your orientation. And then you can use the WASD keys to actually move around. So it works a lot like walking around inside of the game as long as you're holding down the right mouse button. What I like to do generally is put my camera here where I would be in cab if I were driving the tractor, and that's going to help me get a good orientation on this monitor. And then as you can see, we're just going to drag this up into place by using the arrows here. You may find that you need to go like inside and outside as you're doing this just to kind of get it into the right spot. And then similarly, in order to change the rotation, I can grab onto these rings on the outside and rotate it around. You can see there's a window here, so I'm going to kind of line up alongside this window and make sure that we've dragged this into the cab here. If you get right up on the window, sometimes it can make it easier. You'll also see when you get in game if your mod is sticking out through the glass or something, you can always come back in here and tweak it later. And then if you're like me and you like things to get perfectly aligned, you can also come over here to the attributes section and update these values directly. So I'm changing that to a 0 rotation, so it's perfectly aligned here. And then as you can see, the connector on the back of this is maybe just a little bit angled. So I could do something like this. And I like to have my monitor here towards the back of the cab, just to make sure that when I'm sitting in the cab here and I'm loading a grain cart, because that's most likely what I'll be using this monitor for, I can kind of see out the back window and also have the monitor here in my view. If you find the view is moving too fast as you're trying to navigate the viewport here, you can also use the plus and minus keys on your numpad to adjust the nav speed. You can see the value changing down here in the bottom. For working with vehicles and stuff, I generally like to turn this all the way down to a nav speed of 1. With our dashboard placed in the cab here, we now need to move this monitor node into the main component of the vehicle. This is important, especially in more advanced vehicles where the cab may be set up to move independent of other components. And so it's always important that we move this to an appropriate spot in the vehicle's hierarchy. If we expand this main component node here and drill into this, you can see that Sid has done a great job of setting up this hierarchy. It's going to be really easy to find an appropriate spot. In fact, it looks like he's already got the other dashboards here in the cab set up in this dashboards node. And so that seems like a great place to put our monitor. In order to move the monitor node into the dashboards node, we need to hover over this monitor node and then click and hold with the middle mouse button and just drag it up here to dashboards and release. This will move that monitor entry in the hierarchy while maintaining its existing position and rotation inside the vehicle. The last thing we need to do in the editor is click on the monitor node and make note of its index path, which you can find in the attributes window here. I like to just copy this value into an empty notepad window so I can reference it in the next step. With that done, make sure that you save your changes and then exit Giants Editor. Next, we need to update the XML file that corresponds to the i3D file that we just edited. In our case, the series 8rx.xml file. There are a lot of different applications you can use to edit XML files, including just using a simple text editor like Notepad. I prefer to use Notepad++ because it has some more advanced capabilities, including what's called syntax highlighting, which can make it easier to navigate the wall of text that you'll find in these files. However, these advanced features are outside of the scope of today's tutorial. Perma has included a file called code.xml, which you'll want to open and reference for this step as well. Rather than tab back and forth between the vehicle's XML file and this code.xml file, I'm going to just move one of these to another view so that I can see them both at the same time. The first thing we're going to do is add the i3D mappings to the vehicle's XML file. These are usually located at the bottom of a mod file, like we see here. If your vehicle doesn't have an i3D mapping section defined, you can copy this whole section and paste it in just above the closing vehicle tag, like so. However, since we already have one, we don't need to do that. All we need to do is take these 4 i3D mappings and paste them in here at the bottom of the list. Now, you'll notice that each of the nodes says index path from GE. We'll need to replace that with the node we copied from the previous step. And then we're going to add a pipe, this up and down bar, which you can find on your keyboard right above the enter key, and a 1 for the screen node. Doing the same thing for the HUD fill level, except we're going to add a 3 and then a 4 for the HUD fill mass and a 5 for the HUD weight volume. Next, we need to add the dashboard entries that you can find at the top of the code.xml file to the default section within the dashboard section of our vehicle file. Now, this part can be a little bit confusing. If we search for dashboard within our vehicle XML file, you're going to find that there's quite a few different sections called dashboard within this file. We are, however, looking for one specific section where this dashboard section is right here at the first level underneath our vehicle. And you'll know you found the right one when you find the dashboard section with a default section right under it. So we're going to take these 4 dashboard lines, copy them over here, and paste them directly into this default section right below the existing entries. And you'll notice here that when I copied and pasted, the tabbing isn't correct. This is not something that actually matters in XML. However, I like to make sure everything lines up and looks good. It makes editing things in the future just that much easier and cleaner if you keep everything properly indented. Lastly, we need to add the real dashboard section into the i3D file. This can go anywhere at the root level under vehicle. I find it easiest though when adding new things to somebody else's mod to just scroll down here and put new entries right above the i3D mapping section. So in our case, we're going to paste the real dashboard section for the horizontal tablet example, since that's the display that we chose to use in this edit. If you're using a vertical tablet, you would simply copy this other section here. And this is just going to make sure that our text is displayed in the correct spot on the dashboards. Make sure to save the changes to your XML file. I like to just use Control S, and then you can close out of your text editor. With all the changes complete, the last step is to zip your mod back up and put it in your mod directory. Simply select the contents of the folder, right-click, send to compressed zip folder. Make sure to rename this file the same thing as the original mod, which in our case is the folder we extracted into here. So I'm just going to copy this, right-click, rename, paste that in. Makes it a little bit easier. And then you need to move this file into your mods folder. In my case, I've got a mod showcase folder that I use when I'm doing videos. So I'm just going to click and drag this over here, and it's going to move that file into the folder. The mod may already exist, especially if you were already using this. That's okay. We're going to go ahead and overwrite that file with our updated version of the mod. And you'll almost always see it should have a date modified that's been updated when you just zipped it up. That's a good tell that you've got the updated version in your mod folder. And then also make sure that you've got the real dashboard mod that you downloaded off of the in-game mod hub in your mod folder as well. If we fire up the game, you can see that we now have a functioning dashboard. If you want to see a more in-depth overview of how to use the dashboard in-game, check out the video I've linked in the description and maybe somewhere on the screen here if you're on PC. Hopefully you found this tutorial helpful. If you have, please leave a like, it helps me out a lot. If you have any questions, leave a comment or join the Kedrick Farms Discord server, which is also linked in the video description. We have a lot of great folks on there, including Permas Modding, who can help answer any questions or troubleshoot issues that you run into while trying to get this or other modding related things working. Just remember to always be respectful. That's all for today. Kedrick out.